Welcome everyone to the MOOC course on Political Theory, Concepts and Debates. Today we will discuss the module on Rights of the Girl Child. In the introduction, we will look at the increasing relevance of the girl child in the modern era. We will look at the concept of gender equality. We will discuss the influence of cultures and the various kinds of cultures which have influences on society and the legal systems. And we will discuss the problems of discrimination and abuse. Now, to begin with, the rights of the girl child as a specific legal category, as a specific social category, has emerged in the modern era. It is important to note that the rights of the girl child were not as prevalent as a concrete category in the medieval or in the ancient times, even though the girl children may have had certain rights in various societies, even in those times. In the modern era, we find that the awareness regarding the discrimination against girl children has become very prominent, and that is why it is important to address gender equality, to address the rights of the girl child in the modern era. Now, next we look at gender equality. It is important to note that equality can come in two forms. It can be either equality of outcome or equality of opportunity. We must differentiate between these two kinds of equality. Equality of opportunity is a form of equality which allows the same opportunity for all kinds of people regardless of their background, social or political or economic background. However, equality of outcome is not something that is achievable within the domain of the gender spectrum. This is because there are variations among the various genders, and we cannot forcefully impose a monolithic equality among all the genders. However, what we can ensure is equality of opportunity among all genders so that each and every child, each and every person of every gender may have access to the same kinds of opportunities. We find that the legal system of any nation is a product of the culture of that nation. Therefore, before we look at the legal system of any nation, be it India or be it any other nation in the world, we must look at how the culture of that nation informs that legal system. And we find that cultures which are fundamentally patriarchal are not interested in the rights of girl children, whereas cultures which are naturally progressive have a domain of rights for girl children. We find that girl children in particular are victims of discrimination. They are victims of abuse in various ways. They may be victims of neglect. They may be victims who are denied education, who are denied access to various kinds of rights. And of course, abuse of various kinds, be it physical abuse, sexual abuse, domestic abuse. Girl children may be subjected to such kinds of abuse, specifically in patriarchal societies. So before we begin with what the rights of the girl child are, we must look at why we need to study this. What is the purpose of studying the rights of the girl child? First of all, there is sexual harassment in educational institutions. There is sexual harassment at the workplace, acid attacks, rape, domestic violence, cruelty due to dowry, human trafficking, and various other kinds of problems. Sexual harassment in educational institutions is a problem which affects girl children in particular. Of course, this is something which can affect children of all genders. However, we find that it is girl children who are especially victims of such kinds of abuse in educational institutions, be it in school or colleges or universities. There are times when students, female students of universities and colleges even come out with their stories of having been sexually harassed in the institutions, and which often becomes a reason for them to even drop out of their institutions. Sexual harassment at the workplace is often faced by various kinds of women in their offices or in their places of work, and this is something which is a continuation of the sexual abuse that girl children are often subjected to. Acid attacks is a problem that is faced largely in cultures which are governed by patriarchal norms. We find that especially in the South Asian area, we find a lot of these cases of acid attacks on women. And these acid attacks are a result of various kinds of patriarchal norms which have embedded themselves in the mindset of the people. Rape is also a problem that is faced by women, and in fact, rape is a problem that is faced by people of all genders all over the world. But in particular, we find that the girl child is in a very vulnerable situation throughout her period of adolescence, throughout her period of childhood. The girl child is especially vulnerable to such kinds of abuse, of rape or sexual abuse. Human trafficking is a problem that is faced particularly by girl children because girl children are particularly vulnerable to various forms of sexual violence, and which includes human trafficking. Next, we will look at the struggles of girl children in particular. To begin with, girl children struggle for a separate identification. This is a problem that has been highlighted by various sociological researchers who have studied the rights of girl children. They have studied how girl children, first of all, they struggle to be recognized, they struggle to be identified, they struggle to be acknowledged even within the same family, within their own household. While a son may be preferred, the birth of a daughter in certain cultures is neither celebrated nor preferred. When a girl child is born, from the time of her birth itself, her struggle for identification, her struggle for being acknowledged begins. Next, girl children are also subjected to social discrimination, abuse, and trauma. This is not to say that all girl children face social discrimination. This is mainly a social fact. So this is a fact that is limited to certain kinds of cultures. So girl children in certain patriarchal cultures are subjected to discrimination in the sense that they are not allowed to access education, they may not be allowed to inherit property, they may not even be allowed to learn driving. So very basic things that are taught to most children of certain social backgrounds are denied to girl children in certain cultures. Besides social discrimination, girl children may also be subjected to abuse, such as sexual abuse within the family. They may be subjected to physical abuse. They may be subjected to neglect, which is an abuse of health. And due to such kinds of social discrimination and abuse, girl children may also face a lot of trauma, the trauma that haunts them for the rest of their lives, the trauma that informs their orientations, their belief systems, their attitudes towards life. This kind of a trauma develops a negative attitude towards life. And this is something that girl children are victimized by from a very young age, especially if they belong to a highly patriarchal culture. Neglect of health in patriarchal society. We find that where a son is preferred and where a daughter is specifically unwanted, in such families, the daughter who is born is often neglected. The health of the daughter is not given priority. The health of the son is given greater priority. Even in terms of sharing food, even in terms of various kinds of health issues, the health of the girl child is specifically ignored and neglected. And this is a kind of problem which leads to various struggles for girl children. And this is also the reason why we have rights of the girl child, to ensure that such kinds of problems cease to exist. Lack of education. The girl children in certain cultures, even in this modern era, are denied the right to education. They're denied the access to education. While in India, children of all castes, all genders, and all social backgrounds have the right to education, there are countries, even in this day and age, which deny that right to education to girl children. This lack of education then leads to a lack of intellectual development in the girl child, which leads to lack of opportunities for the girl child to make a place for herself in the world. Such kinds of problems also make us realize the need for the rights of girl children. Child marriage and honor killings are another problem that are faced by girl children even in this modern era. Child marriages are a problem that developed during the medieval times. However, in some cultures, they have continued till date. And if a girl chooses her own partner, and if that partner does not belong to the same community, there may be incidents of honor killing. Such incidents of honor killing and child marriage also reflect on the patriarchal mindset of society, and they also make us understand why we need a codified, a concrete system of rights for girl children. Next, we look at the influence of cultures which inform the rights of the girl child. There is a role of culture in informing social orientations towards girl children. The cultural system informs the legal system, and marginalization of girl children occurs across nations and cultures. First of all, we look at how cultures of various nations, cultures of various sections in various nations have a role to play in informing the social orientations towards girl children. So for instance, while in some cultures girl children are celebrated, in other cultures girl children may be denied the right to several kinds of basic amenities, such as education or even health. We find that societies which have a culture of acceptance, societies which have a culture of progressiveness in them, tend to have greater rights for girl children, whereas societies which are still governed by patriarchal norms do not seem to care for girl children. They do not even seem to care for international sanctions on them, which seek to ensure the rights of girl children. Therefore, we must acknowledge that the cultural system has a role to play in formulating the legal system. We cannot look at the legal system in isolation. The legal system exists because of the culture to which it belongs. Therefore, in societies which have only just started to legalize certain rights for girl children, we can understand that those rights did not exist for the girl children before. Whereas in other societies, we may find that girl children have already been enjoying certain rights for a long period of time. So this highlights the differences between various cultures and shows us how different cultures have a role to play in creating the legal systems of various societies. We must also remember that cultures not only create legal frameworks, they also create the social orientations towards various things. So when we belong to a culture which is deeply patriarchal, which is misogynistic, we find that such a culture creates such a mindset among women, children, and all categories of people which abhors the girl child. A mindset which is fundamentally opposed to the rights of the girl child. Finally, we must acknowledge that marginalization of girl children is a problem that has existed across nations and across cultures. However, at the same time, there is a difference in degrees in marginalization of women and girl children. So while in some societies women may not even be allowed to drive cars, or only recently may have been allowed to drive cars, in other societies women may even have the right to rule. Women may have been queens. Women may have been worshipped as goddesses. So the cultures that we belong to have a role to play in influencing our mindsets, in influencing our social orientations of the entire public sphere, and of course they have a role to play in influencing the legal system as well. Having discussed the cultural influences and the role that they play in the legal sphere and the role that they play in the social sphere, we will now look at the girl child in the Hindu culture. First of all, there is a culture of worshipping goddesses in Hinduism. In Hinduism, the respect for women and the respect for girl children and the respect for all living beings, respect for even non-living beings, is a fundamental tenet of Hinduism. Next, Kumari Puja is a part of Durga Puja rituals. We will discuss the importance of Kumari Puja in this context in a few minutes. And as a result of these aspects of Hinduism, there is an orientation towards girl children which is naturally progressive, which is naturally positive. First, let us look at the worship of goddesses in Hinduism. Goddesses in Hinduism are worshipped as mothers. Therefore, when we worship our goddesses in the Hindu culture, we do not see them as separate from our beings. We worship our gods and goddesses as our own parents. Therefore, the connection that the Hindu culture cultivates among its devotees is a deeply intimate connection towards our own deities and gods and goddesses. Within the ritual of Durga Puja, there is an element of Kumari Puja in which a young girl is worshipped as the goddess herself. The young girl is dressed like the goddess and she is worshipped by the Purohit directly as a form of the goddess herself. Therefore, in Hinduism, we are encountering a kind of culture in which girl children are not only respected, girl children are literally worshipped as goddesses. A culture which promotes this form of a worship, which respects girl children and which worships girl children as goddesses, naturally leads us to a social, cultural, and legal orientation which is accepting, which is empathetic, and which is deeply progressive, and which naturally encompasses the rights of the girl child. Even before the rights of the girl child may have been codified in the Indian legal system, the Hindu culture of India itself is such that it allows the rights of the girl child to develop. We will look at it from ancient times till the modern times, and we will look at certain specific instances of discrimination or abuse on girl children. To begin with, in the ancient times in China, there was a practice of foot binding of girl children. This was done to ensure that girl children may be more eligible for marriage. Small feet were considered to be more desirable for marriage. However, in order to make the feet small, the girl children had to endure a lot of physical trauma. For their feet were crushed, they were forcefully made small, and this is an example of the kind of problems that girl children faced in the ancient times. Next, we look at female genital mutilation. Female genital mutilation is an issue faced by women and girl children from a very young age in various countries of the world even today. This is particularly found in sub-Saharan Africa, in some of the Arab states, and even in some parts of Eastern Europe and Asia. This is a practice that existed in the medieval times, and unfortunately this is a practice that continues to exist in some parts of the world even today. This is also an example of how girl children and women are abused and discriminated against in the world even today. Next, we will look at the rights of the girl children in India. The girl child in India has a right against female feticide, the right to education, right against domestic abuse, right to stridhan, right to inherit property, and right against child marriage. Female feticide is a problem that is seen in various parts of South Asia. Female feticide is when the female fetus is killed even before it has a chance to mature. The female fetus is killed specifically because the family does not want a daughter. The girl child in India also has the right to education. This is a right that is enjoyed by all children in India, which includes the girl child, and it ensures gender equality. As mentioned before, it ensures equality of opportunity of all genders, and it ensures that the girl child in India has the right to access a career of her own as much as the boy child does. Right against domestic abuse is also a right that is enjoyed by people of all genders as well as all ages in India, and at the same time, it is a right which ensures protection of the girl child as well. We have seen before that the girl child is especially vulnerable to domestic abuse within the household, especially if the household is fundamentally misogynistic, if the household is against the birth of the daughter. So the right against domestic abuse therefore protects the girl child in particular in these instances. The girl child in India also has the right to stridhan. The stridhan is the property of the girl child. It is the property of the woman. This is a right that is enjoyed specifically by Hindu women in India. The girl child in India also has the right to inherit property. We find in the medieval times as well as in the pre-modern, early modern times, there have been cultures which have denied women the right to inherit property. However, in India, in the modern times, the girl child also has the right to inherit property. Women also have the right to inherit property. Right against child marriage is also a fundamental right of the girl child in India. Because child marriage is still practiced in certain parts, and because child marriage leads to a hindrance in the development of the girl child, therefore, there has developed a legal system which prevents child marriage in India. There are a number of international policies and initiatives which ensure the rights of the girl child. We will first look at the international policies and initiatives which protect girl children, and then we will look at how the Indian government has worked to protect girl children. Article 25 of Universal Declaration of Human Rights in the United Nations. This article states that all children, regardless of whether they are born in or out of wedlock, shall be entitled to the same social protection. So this is a fundamental right that is guaranteed by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. which ensures that all children, regardless of the legitimacy of their birth or their lineage, are entitled to some degree of social protection. This is to ensure rights of all children, and this includes the rights of the girl child. Next, the International Convention on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, or the ICESCR. In 1966, this International Human Rights Treaty was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly. This convention ensured economic, social and cultural rights. This includes the rights of the girl child as much as it includes the rights of any other human being. And therefore, when we are studying the rights of the girl child, it is also important to look at this convention that was held and the way in which it ensured the rights of the girl child. The United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child, or the UNCRC, 1989. This remarkable convention pushed governments around the world to revise their laws regarding child rights to ensure greater protection of children from violence, abuse, exploitation. Now we will look at the initiatives of the Indian government to ensure the rights of the girl child. The Beti Bachao Beti Padhao of 2015. This is a policy that was developed by the Indian government. It ensured the prohibition of female feticide. It ensured reservation for girls in education system, the property rights of girls, elimination of all forms of discrimination and disparity against the girl child, and provision of a healthy childhood. This kind of a policy was developed specifically to ensure that the girl child is allowed to be born, the girl child is allowed to develop, and that the girl child is allowed to educate herself and access various opportunities in the public sphere. We must remember that even if legal systems are in place to ensure the rights of the girl child, in certain cases, certain local cultures may not allow the girl child to access those rights. Even if the nation may allow the girl child several rights, the local culture may cause some kinds of hindrance. The Beti Bachao Beti Padhao policy was one that helped to eradicate those kinds of hindrances, to eradicate the local cultural hindrances, and allow the girl child to access the same opportunities as the boy child. Next, Integrated Child Development Service, or the ICDS. The ICDS helps in immunization, elimination of nutritional deficiency, as well as the preschool non-formal education of the girl child. The ICDS works for children of all genders, and therefore it also benefits the girl child. The Integrated Management of Neonatal and Childhood Illnesses. This is the IMNCI. This initiative was started by the Indian government in 2000, along with UNICEF and WHO. The aim of this initiative was to save all children in their neonatal period. Next, we look at the Preconception and Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Act, 1994. This act prevents and criminalizes prenatal sex determination of the fetus in order to prevent female feticide. There is a continuing discrimination, marginalization, and abuse. Despite the existence of rights of girl children in India and across the world, we find that there is a problem of discrimination, there is a problem of marginalization, and there is a problem of abuse which exists across the world. We must distinguish between problems which are caused by local cultures, problems which are caused by individual people or individual families, and problems which are caused by a larger cultural background. If a problem is caused by a specific individual, we cannot attribute it to the entire culture. Similarly, if an entire culture is responsible for creating a negative orientation towards girl children, then we must acknowledge the problems that exist within that culture itself. So when we are discussing discrimination, marginalization, and abuse of the girl child, we must understand where that discrimination comes from, whether that comes from an individual person, whether that comes from a specific family, or whether it comes from a local small culture, or whether it comes from a larger cultural background. Next, we must remember the need for awareness of the rights of the girl child. We must generate greater awareness regarding the rights of the girl child, and we must also generate awareness regarding the need for those rights. We must understand why these rights exist, and once we understand why the rights exist, we will also be able to accept the existence of the rights of the girl child. The rights exist not in a vacuum, they exist within a cultural setup, and they exist because of a history of discrimination. They exist because of a history of marginalization and abuse. They exist so that we may in the future control such discrimination, we may put an end to such discrimination and abuse. There is a need for legal protection of girl children as well. We have noted before that despite the existence of various laws in place which protect the rights of the girl child, the local cultures of certain regions may not allow access to education, they may not allow access to proper health care of the girl child, and they may still be against the birth of the daughter. Therefore, we need both the legal protection as well as social orientations to change towards girl children. We need a more progressive mindset towards the birth of the daughter. We need greater acceptance of the girl child within society, especially in the local cultures which are still patriarchal in nature, which are still misogynistic. Next, we must acknowledge the influence of cultures in various societies, in various nations. We have already noted how since the ancient times till the medieval and till the modern times, there has been a continuing history of abuse of girl children and discrimination against girl children. However, while certain nations, while certain cultures have progressed with time, while certain cultures have allowed greater rights of girl children over the years, certain other cultures continue to practice regressive forms of abuse against girl children by denying them right to education, by denying them the right to be born, and by continuing a fundamentally patriarchal mindset even after the girl child is born. So when we are studying the rights of the girl child, we must understand how the culture is responsible for creating the rights of the girl child, or how the culture is responsible for creating a lack of rights of the girl child. While discussing cultural influences, we have also studied, in particular, the role of Hinduism in creating a culture which accepts the girl child. We find that certain cultures, such as Hinduism, are naturally promoting the rights of the girl child, even if individual families or individual people within this culture may not agree or may not be conducive to the rights of the girl child. The culture itself is one that promotes empathy and which promotes compassion and respect towards the girl child. On the other hand, there are still cultures which promote a lack of empathy towards the girl child, which promote discrimination against the girl child, and accordingly the legal system and the social orientations of those countries and those nations have developed a negative attitude towards the girl child.